Have you ever had just a brilliant idea, a real spark, only to see it kind of, well, fizzle out? Or maybe get completely lost in translation when it came time to actually, build the thing?
Oh, definitely. Happens all the time.
Or, found yourself scratching your head wondering how these really complex systems could be huge software, could be just organizing your life, how they managed to come together without just collapsing.
Right, without turning into chaos.
Exactly. Well, welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're plunging into a concept that really tackles this head on.
Yeah, this should be good.
We're talking about the structure phase within the Taxshila Technology framework. And our guide for this is the book Blueprint of Taxshila Technology, Structure for Innovation by Shiva Narayan Taxshila Page.
A fascinating read, actually.
So our mission today, it's really to unpack why getting the structure right isn't just, a technical detail.
Not at all.
It's actually strategic. It's cognitive. It's a superpower for anything you want to build or even just understand properly.
That's a great way to put it.
Think of it maybe as the ultimate shortcut, understanding how vision becomes reality.
Yeah.
And why skipping this step, it almost always leads to, well, a tangled mess.
That's right. The structure phase, it's really all about turning those abstract ideas, those concepts,
Right?
into a clear, actionable blueprint. It's the architectural framework.
Okay.
It provides that foundational sort of bone structure for innovation to actually take shape.
Gotcha. So without it, you're basically building on sand.
Exactly.
Right.
Building on
Yeah.
sand. Good analogy.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit more. The source calls the structure phase the crucial turning point.
Yeah.
How exactly does it act as that bridge, that gap between just a good idea and something real?
Well, it's the second stage in this Taxshila technology model. It comes right after the definition phase.
Okay, definition first, then structure.
Precisely. So the
Yeah.
definition phase, that's where you're conceptualizing the big picture. The purpose, the vision, the broad functions.
The when and why.
Exactly. But then the structure phase kicks in. And its job is to craft that precise architectural framework.
That skeletal foundation you mentioned?
That's it, the skeleton. It's where creativity and deployment can really, flourish because they have a solid base.
Right.
This is where those raw concepts get transformed into what the source calls structured innovation matrices.
Structured innovation matrices.
Think of it just like an architect drafting a detailed blueprint before any construction starts.
Or like the skeleton of a skyscraper.
Perfect analogy. That's exactly it. This phase delivers the logical anatomy of innovation, as the book puts it.
Logical anatomy. I like that.
Yeah. And it's not just technical. It's really a strategic imperative.
How so?
Because it's what ensures your innovation isn't just feasible, but that it's also repeatable, adaptable, and, resilient, robust.
So it can handle change and stress.
Exactly. Without this phase, even the most brilliant visionary ideas, they risk just collapsing under the weight of, misalignment or complexity or just plain chaos.
That makes total sense. So if we're building this blueprint, this structure, what's the main thing that comes out of this phase? What's the output?
Right.
And you also mentioned something called Taxshila Learnography. How does that fit in? Because that sounds really key for our listeners looking for those aha moments.
Okay, yeah. The core output is what's called the innovation matrix.
The innovation matrix.
Yes. Imagine it as a really detailed, structured and scalable model. It maps out all your functional blocks, your task flows, making sure everything lines up perfectly with the final technological outcome you're aiming for.
So it's the comprehensive roadmap.
Exactly. It's the roadmap. And the source highlights that this matrix answers 6 really critical questions.
6 questions. What are they?
They are. Why does the system exist? What functions must it deliver? How are those functions partitioned or broken down? How do tasks flow between them? How will the system scale up? And importantly, how will it be governed?
Wow. Okay. If you can answer all those clearly.
You're in really good shape. Yeah.
That's incredibly thorough. And the learnography part. How does Taxshila Learnography connect to structuring an idea?
Great question. So this phase deeply integrates concepts from Taxshila Learnography.
Which is
a framework's unique take on how we actually learn, how we internalize and structure complex information. It brings in things like visuo-spatial mapping.
Visuo-spatial, seeing it in your mind's eye.
Exactly. See it, mapping it out spatially, and also brainpage architecture.
Brainpage architecture.
Yeah, essentially means before you build anything physical, you're encouraged to mentally rehearse it, refine it. visualize the entire structure in your head.
Okay.
This brain page mapping and visual spatial organization, it's a really powerful cognitive process.
Because you're building it mentally first.
You got it.
Yeah.
And through something the source calls cyclicide rehearsal.
What now?
Cyclicide rehearsal. Think of it like a structured mental walkthrough. You refine it over and over in your mind, like an athlete visualizing the perfect move.
Ah, okay. Mental practice.
Precisely. And through that, these mental visuals become brain page maps and modules.
Right.
These are basically mental blueprints that engineers or really anyone can reconstruct later, even without constantly looking at physical documents.
Because it's deeply internalized.
Exactly. That deep internalization, it dramatically speeds up everything. Later design reviews, coding, integration, even just general problem solving. The knowledge becomes inherently yours.
That is a fascinating layer to this whole process. Okay, so let's bring this down to earth a bit. If we take these principles, what does this mean for actually building technology?
Yeah.
And crucially, what are those key design principles we should really grab onto to avoid the common, frustrating pitfalls?
Right. So when it comes to the actual building, the structure phase really emphasizes several key design principles. First up, modularity first.
Modularity, break it down.
Yep. Break the system into loosely coupled, highly cohesive components.
Meaning?
Meaning each piece does one job, does it really well, and they don't get all tangled up with each other.
Okay.
It makes them easier to work on separately, easier to upgrade later. Think Lego bricks versus, I don't know, a solid block of concrete.
Got it. Legos, not concrete. What else?
Second, a single source of truth.
Sounds important.
It is. You need a living, always up-to-date repository for your architecture diagrams, your interface contracts, everything in one place, and it's current.
That prevents that documentation drift you hear about.
Exactly. Where the code does one thing and the plan says another. This stops that. Third principle, scalability by intent.
By intent, meaning you plan for it.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You anticipate where the high loads might be, where the bottlenecks could appear, and you design for that from the get-go. You don't just cross your fingers and hope it scales.
You engineer it to scale.
You engineer it. And finally, traceability end-to-end.
Traceability.
Yeah, making sure every single structural element maps upwards to a business goal
Okay.
and downwards to a specific test case. So everything is tied to its purpose and can be verified.
Keeps everything accountable and focused. Makes sense. And what are the classic mistakes, the pitfalls people fall into when they don't do this stuff?
Oh, there are definitely some common traps. One big one is over-specification.
Trying to define too much upfront.
Exactly. Trying to nail down every tiny detail before you even start properly. It just stalls progress.
So what's the fix?
Capture the areas that you know might change, flag them, and plan to revisit them later. Don't get bogged down.
Right. Be flexible.
Another classic is the big ball of mud.
I think I've worked on a few of those.
We probably all have. It happens when those module boundaries get ignored. Everything just becomes this tangled, interconnected mess.
Like that messy kitchen drawer where everything's jumbled together.
Perfect analogy. You avoid it by enforcing clear interfaces and clear ownership for each module.
Okay.
Any others?
Well, we touched on it, but documentation drift is huge. The architecture evolves, but the diagrams and docs don't keep up.
Yeah, that's a recipe for confusion.
Totally. The solution there is increasingly things like docs as code. Treat your documentation like software code itself.
Right.
Version control it, automate checks on it, keep it alive.
Smart. Treat docs like code.
Yeah, and, getting the structure phase right. It just makes everything that comes after it so much smoother.
How so?
Well, it provides that cognitive clarity for the engineers, right? It accelerates the next phase, the innovative phase, because prototypes can just plug into these predefined slots.
Oh, okay.
It trims the effort needed in the formatting phase because you're not doing huge re-architecting late in the game.
Saves time and headaches later.
Exactly. And ultimately, it sets up the final phases, Taxshila, and intuitive for rapid feedback loops, and much more friction-free user experiences. It all flows better.
That's a really powerful case for getting that blueprint absolutely right from the start. Okay, but thinking broader now, beyond just building tech, what are the bigger implications here? Understanding and applying this kind of structural thinking in our own lives, our work, this feels like it could unlock some real aha moments for anyone listening.
Absolutely. I think this is where the study's findings really resonate beyond just, software engineering.
Yeah.
The structure phase defines that innovation matrix, right? That brings consistency to any project. Think about planning a complex event or designing a course curriculum or even just organizing a big personal project.
Okay.
That visuo-spatial planning we talked about, It enhances clarity and retention for anything you're trying to learn or organize. How you mentally map information can massively improve your understanding and recall.
So visualizing helps you remember and understand better.
Definitely. And modular design strengthens adaptability and scalability, whether it's code or, say, your business plan. Breaking things into manageable, independent parts makes them easier to change and grow later on,
Less overwhelming, too.
for sure. Then there's goal-oriented task structuring. That prevents fragmentation. It keeps your efforts focused,
Yeah.
stops you feeling like you're being pulled in a million directions at once.
We've all been there.
Absolutely. Brainpage architecture, that mental modeling, it improves accuracy in development, sure. But in learning, it helps with precision and deeper understanding.
Okay.
And critically, the source emphasizes that weak structural planning leads to long-term instability in any system, not just tech.
That's a big one.
It is. It also points out that a clear structure strengthens interdisciplinary collaboration
How does that work?
because it provides that shared blueprint, that common understanding
Yeah.
that diverse teams can all work from. Everyone's on the same page, literally.
Right. Common language.
Exactly. And finally, a solid structure phase is essential for knowledge transfer readiness. It makes information easier to teach, learn, share, and apply.
So, okay. If you're listening right now, what does all this mean for you? How can you apply this?
Well, it depends a bit on who you are, right? For innovators, engineers, the message is design with structure first. Use those modular frameworks.
Right.
For educators, school leaders, think about embedding this visual-spatial learning, this structural reasoning, right into the curriculum. Train students in things like brain-page mapping early on.
Interesting. Build those skills young.
Yeah. For knowledge architects, building systems to manage information, build your knowledge transfer management systems, your KTMS, on a solid structural matrix.
Okay.
For policymakers, leaders, and institutions, support policies and funding that actually encourage this structure-first approach to innovation.
Makes sense. Invest in the foundation.
Exactly. And for you, listening right now, whether you're a learner or a professional, just a change maker in your own sphere, the call is really to learn to think in structure, not just in steps. Develop that ability to visualize, to plan, to build your ideas from the ground up, internalize them, using these ideas from Taxshila Learnography.
So it's a way of thinking, really.
Absolutely. The source frames structural thinking as a core 21st century skill. It's vital for anyone who wants to turn ideas into something real, something meaningful, something with lasting impact.
Wow. Okay, so wrapping up. We've really seen how this structure phase in the Taxshila Technology framework isn't just, some step in a process.
No, it's foundational.
It really is the foundational pillar for innovation. It's that critical point where the vision meets the actual structure, turning those abstract, maybe brilliant ideas into blueprints that are actionable, resilient, real.
That's the core of it.
And there's that point from the source that really sticks with you, doesn't it? Over-investing in structure rarely proves wasteful. Skipping it invites costly rework.
Yeah, that's a line to remember.
Yeah.
Better to spend the time up front.
It's fundamentally about design before build, making absolutely sure that Skyscraper's skeleton can actually support the vision you have for it.
Couldn't have said it better.
So as you finish listening to this deep dive, maybe just take a moment. Think about any project, could be big, could be small, that you're working on right now.
Yeah, apply it.
Or maybe it's a new skill you're trying to learn, a big decision you need to make, even just a personal goal. Where can you apply this powerful idea of structured thinking? Where can you try to visualize that blueprint before you just dive headfirst into all the details?
It changes how you approach things.
It really does. Because, as the source puts it so well, innovation without structure is like a building without a foundation.
Simple, too.
So let this deep dive maybe inspire you to, start with that blueprint, grow with purpose, build with precision, make that structure phase your launch pad for meaningful, intelligent, scalable innovation, making sure your ideas don't just spark, they actually take shape and they soar.